Good afternoon, everybody. It's Monday, August 23rd, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. My guest today, a musician who found his way into the studio lifestyle, calling one of Toronto's top places to record, Vespa Studios, his home for several years. With credits including the Barenaked Ladies, Danko Jones, Big Wreck, the Trews, and most recently, and one of my favorites, Skullfist. Just to clarify, after I asked to confirm some of his credits, in his own words, I hope it doesn't sound like I produced and mixed all of those, just various engineering credits on them. I laughed when I read that, because when you work in music production, you totally get it. Please welcome our guest today, producer, engineer, and mixer, Chris Snow. Chris.
Hey, I love that intro.
Thank you. Second favorite part of the show.
I was worried about that.
It's funny. And again, I legit laughed out loud when I read that. When you were messaging on Facebook. Sorry, I was going to move my laptop. Messaging on Facebook about it, because credits for people in our line of work can make a huge difference.
Yeah.
But knowing what you were doing on some of those records, like, it's important for people to know the background for it. So I hear you.
You know what's funny? Most people don't care. They're like, "Oh, you worked on that record?" Like, they have no idea what you did. Like, they could care less. But I just like to be clear on it.
Well, it's good to clarify. A friend. Did you ever meet Sean LaFave?
I know that name.
Yeah, I think he did
one of those names I know.
Yeah, I think he did some work at Vespa, but like he had, I think, like Cancer Bats.
Oh, he was an old assistant, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
He had all those credits, and I remember the two of us were talking, and it was one of those things, like it was a grass is greener thing. Yeah. And we'll get into this later, but it's a grass is greener thing because, he had these wicked credits. And meanwhile, I was working more local bands and regional bands, but I was more hands-on with things.
Yeah.
And both of us were having a conversation. It was like, I wish I was doing what you were doing. Because, like, to be in the room when they're making a Billy Talent record or something, it's like, or a Muse, he had like a Muse credit. And I was
but you know what? He probably just went and grabbed lunch for them. So,
he's like set stuff. I think I don't want to.
Plugged in mics. There's like, man, I've done tons of that stuff. And I like my earliest credits were those. Yeah. Like, literally picking up band members, getting them lunch, and it's so integral to the session,
the flow of the session.
When I started doing my own stuff, and when I do my own sessions, like, I rarely have an assistant, and it makes my life a living hell, like having to do all of that myself, like having to engineer and produce, and then I have to tear down the mics and coil, so
we can expand on that definitely later on when we get into that. But just to finish the story with the Muse credit, I think he set up, like, they brought in Matt Bellamy's like rig, and then they set it up, and then Matt, the singer, was basically like, thanks, and then he closed the door, and Sean's like, I just sat in the lounge and waited for him to be done. Like, that's my credit. But people don't think about that. They think the studios are all crazy and rock star, and it's no.
Yeah, and like you sat there and like recorded the guy's vocals or something.
Yeah, at the desk and sweating, and you're just like, oh.
Yeah, it's like, no, I just got their lunch.
So we were chatting a little bit earlier. We never see each other in real life.
No,
we see each other online all the time.
I think I've met you in person once.
I'm trying.
Years and years ago at the
conference or something,
show or something.
But yeah, it's like we know each other through online. So I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah, thanks, man.
To be able to chat about this. So what's been going on these days?
Right now, nothing. I'm trying to do nothing. Like, I'm trying to just take a break, because the past 2 months were just ballistic. Like, it was crazy. So I'm just trying to take the rest of the month off and give myself some downtime.
Just a break, yeah.
But I've still been doing stuff, like, mostly just like cleaning and like menial tasks like that. Like, I don't know, you saw me post all that stuff that I've been I'm trying to get rid of like cables and stuff that I've collected over the past like 15 years. Like,
Because you
I'm
might
like,
need it.
I know, and man,
I'm
it's
gonna
been
fix
so
this.
hard.
I might need this.
Oh,
You
dude,
don't.
it's been so hard getting rid of some of this stuff because I'm like, oh, like I want to fix this, but I'm like, oh yeah, I've had it for 15 years, or I'm like, I gotta get rid of it. I have to, like, like declutter, and it
Yeah,
feels
no,
good.
it
Like I got
does
a
feel good.
yeah, I got a huge pile of stuff that's like slowly dwindling down. I've been like posting it for just take it prices, and I'm like, I don't care, I'll drop it off, just get rid of it. So I've been just trying to relax and do a little, like enjoy the summer, and I never go anywhere or do anything, right? So it's
That's production lifestyle, though.
yeah.
You're
Well, and you're working so much, and then you never have time, or you never think of planning anything, and then when you do have some downtime, it's too late to plan anything. And especially with COVID, it's so difficult you can't just go and do stuff. Like,
yeah.
you have to book it like months in advance almost. So it's
And then hope things are going to be okay by the time the actual
oh
time
man,
comes
yeah.
up.
So yeah, that's what I've been doing now.
Well, I want to say the last couple of months was Vespa.
Yeah.
Is that been reason why it's been a bit hectic?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's just the past year has just been like crazy. Like, I probably because nobody's touring, so they probably just want to make a record. So like this year's been just nonstop, and then the past few months, especially, just I don't know. I just got this influx of work. I like mostly like mixing stuff. There was some tracking stuff, but I think I mixed like over like 40 tracks in the past like 2 months, just for a bunch of bands that were like, hey man, like I
Jeez.
got something. And then with the studio closing, like it was especially like, okay, if you got something, like give it to me now, let's get it done. Because
Yeah.
like I mean, not that I'm not going to be doing stuff at home or in other places, but it's like, hey, I'm here now. Rats was taking some time off, so there was a bunch of studio time available for me to do a bunch of work. So I just was like, yeah, bring it on, man, like just give it to me. So I just banged out like, I think it was like 45 songs for 5 or 6 different bands and artists and stuff. And then the move was just, and we emptied that, we gutted that studio in 2 weeks.
So just to clarify, so Vespa closed.
Yeah,
Or they moved rooms, or
no, well, he sold a building.
oh, okay.
So he took like it's staying as a studio.
Okay.
It's just kind of exchanged hands to like a young guy.
Okay.
And yeah, we'll just see. Like I don't know. There was really no big plan. Like it was very like I don't think Harry was like, like I'm gonna sell the studio. Like I'm gonna look for somebody to buy it, or I don't think he was really like actively looking around or anything. I think, it's just somebody was looking and
Just
approached
opportunity
them, and
on either end.
yeah, like, and he was just like, well, he's had that studio for 25 years.
Jeez.
So like, and it's in North York. He lives in Oakville, like 5 minutes away from me. So it's a long drive. He's mostly doing mastering now. And, yeah, I think it was just good opportunity to kind of get what he wanted for it too. And
just new chapter.
Yeah, really. So I honestly don't know what is going to be next. I hate to speculate either. So
no, and it's like just talking about it and just thinking out loud. It's just like so much has been up in the air the last year.
Oh yeah,
and just the amount of things that I don't know if you were running like sessions the whole time, but just like the amount of like people taking a step back from, especially from music. And again, you mentioned it not being able to tour, and with some of the studios kind of closing up for a bit to figure out what was going on with health stuff and protocols and regulations and everything. It's just been hard for some people, and it's like going pretty much a year and a half like this.
Yeah.
And then you get to the other end of it. It's like, what do I actually want to put back into my life? Sort of thing. Like, what are the stresses I want? I think that's been a big part of it too. But when you mentioned the mixing, like how many mixed gigs you got, that's what I was saying to people last year. I'm like, everyone's going to start recording. So like, if you're not tracking right now, enjoy your time, because you're going to get your inbox is going to open up with mixed gigs. Everyone, and fixed gigs. You know who you are.
Yeah. Not a couple of those.
It's like, can you mix this and prep it, tune it, time it, fix it? I'm not pointing anybody in particular. I was just making a joke there, but yeah, no, there's been a lot of mixed stuff, but just people being able to work from home or work from smaller rooms.
Yeah, like that was
and
so,
get great
so
results.
much of those. Yeah, man. Like there was a bunch of those that they just recorded it in their jam space or whatever, and I'm like, cool. Like, I don't know, I would have liked to record it, but there's some stuff that I would have done differently. But I don't know, I don't have to stress about this. Like, it's like, I mean, it's like getting stuff that somebody else did is always a little bit of a why'd you do? Oh man, like I gotta try to shape this now, and like some stuff. So it's just a different kind of stress.
Yeah. I think one of the upsides is for the musicians to actually understand the amount of care and attention that goes into some of the tracking. Sometimes they just shovel it in, or sometimes too, they rely on us to let them know when it was good and we can move on, so I think sometimes it's good for them to kind of hear what it actually sounds like.
Yeah, that's true. But you know what the other side of that I found too is that they'll just track it and then they think that that mixing is just gonna make it
better. No, I 100%.
Like, you don't know how much work goes into making this sound like what you want it to sound like, and it's like, give me mix notes, but it's like you have a lot of audacity giving me mix notes after what you just handed me. Like, not to be like, oh, I'm like, saving your album here, but it's like, I don't know, some people are just like clueless when it comes to recording, and they'll be like, oh, can you fix that? Why is that vocal out of tune? Well, because you sang it out of tune. Like, what do you like, what do you want?
Yeah, and the tools that I have couldn't get it.
And but I just sometimes I just have to give people disclaimers that, like, look, I it's mixing, not fixing. I'm mixing it, I'm not editing it. If you want me to edit, and like, nothing against anybody, like, they're just, some of them are just like learning and they're kind of new, like, so and some people have been genuinely like, oh, okay, like, good to know, because like, I have some vocals, I'm like, yeah, like, either if I tune your vocals or have to do anything like that, then I'm either going to charge you for it or just deal with it before you send it to me. No,
it's one of those things in editing too, for anyone that's listening, I guess on either side of the glass, be it artist or production. Editing, in my opinion, is such a can of worms, because once you start opening things up and start messing with stuff, something else is now the glaring issue. You fix that, something else is the glaring issue. And it's like, and it's like, either we're doing it or we're not. And think of it as like, like a tradesman job or something like that. If you're carpenter or plumber, it's like, you can't just like kind of do the plumbing and like leave the rest. And well, enough of the water will just kind of spray over into this part and it'll be fine. It's like, no, like, either do it right and get it, or just like leave it and know it is what it is, sort of thing. It's I do agree with you. It's with people tracking themselves, but I still think at least they can hear it or they can't.
No, for sure. And maybe realize the expectations of the mixing, that it's like, this is kind of what you're gonna get if you don't want to edit it, or you don't. This is what we have. So like, this is how far we can kind of push it to sound good, right? So.
Yeah, I was just not to stay on this forever, because like we could spend another hour and a half on this, but like I was taught you can raise it a letter grade, and that's something to keep in mind. We get something where you're like, okay, it's a C, I can bring it to people, but like the references are like AAA. So let's be realistic about this.
I actually love that. I love that. reference,
Yeah,
because
just
I
as
torture myself with that a lot of times, you know, like the with the references and wanting this stuff to sound a certain way and being like, oh, why doesn't it sound like, why can't I get to sound like that? And you know, I'll talk to Harry and Harry will be like, dude, remember, like, you know, the stuff you're referencing was, you know, it was like a $500,000 record, you know, like,
everybody pro.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
and also sometimes everyone at the top of their game
yeah,
during like a golden era, and you're like, okay, well,
fair.
let's try for it. Like
No, for
let's
sure.
yeah
And like at least kind of compete a little bit, right?
yeah. But no, this is one of the things. Oh, something else I was thinking. I like this topic because it's a real it's that thought. That train left the station. I can't remember anymore. But I did want to bring this up from the chat. Mike Diesel said, I think going into studio and working with a good producer engineer is so critical and sometimes a total reality check people should experience and grow from.
100%.
I agree.
Yeah.
You'll learn a lot about your playing and your tones.
Yeah, and you know, I think when people like, I think it's great that they do it themselves, but when they're not with a producer or like an engineer, it's like you're trying to wear all the hats.
Yeah.
So like you lose perspective, and there's nobody there to tell you if you should do it again, or if you've done it good enough. And then the other thing is that there's nobody there to like kind of coach you and be like, you know, like this is I don't know, like here's a good way of approaching your drum playing, or you know, even just general quality control stuff, or teaching you things. I think, like, you know, I've had drummers see me or sit in on like some of my editing. Like, people don't usually sit in on editing, but I've had a couple people sit in on it, on editing, or even recording themselves, like start going through their takes and being like, wow, like I didn't realize I was doing that. Like, I didn't realize, like, you know, like all these years, like, you know, we would do drums, and I'd go, oh, can you make the drums like sound like this? It's like, now I realize why that was such a high request, because I'm not doing that. And I'm like, yes, you get it now.
Yeah, they see it. They see the ingredients that go in. Although the joke I was going to make actually ties in, but the idea we just put anything into a pot, put it in the oven, and hope it's going to be a cake. And you're just like, it really gets down to the ingredients. But with the, you know, you're talking about with the tracking and musicians seeing that. Them being able to see their performances, or live, like watching your live shows. You know, when a band gets off stage and it's like, oh, we killed it, we were awesome tonight, and they watch their show after and they're like, oh wow, like there's a lot of difference between what we think we did and what we actually did. And you know, and we talk about the different hats. It's like having somebody else in real time, especially tracking vocals. There's I'm sure you feel this too. There's so many times where, like, you know, there's a word that's pitchy or something, and that's all the singer fixates on. But the rest of it was good. We just need like those couple words in there, and you can comp that in, and it's not a big deal. But they're like, the whole thing's garbage. And you're like, no,
I
like,
know. Yeah.
Like a lot of it was good, but having those different hats and having someone else to kind of, as you're saying, like kind of wear that different hat and be able to be second set of ears in a production or a producer or engineer role. It can save them a lot of time because they've got that real time feedback and stuff. But yeah, it's I think there's been a lot of growing and a lot of reality checks for some musicians recording themselves.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a great experience, and you should be able to do it too for the sake of demos and
absolutely.
Like doing some pre-pro by yourself, and you know, like you should. It's 2021. Like you should have an idea how to record yourself.
Yeah, people are making like movies on their cell phones these days.
Oh yeah,
that look awesome. So I'm pretty sure you should have enough gear these days to do some recording at home.
Yeah,
come on, musicians. Speaking of just getting started, how did you get into music? How did you get into production? You got guitars there. Are you a guitar player?
No, I just collect them. Yeah, I'm definitely a guitar player. Definitely started out like, you know, anybody jamming, playing, wanting to be in a band and like wanting to do that whole thing. And I think the reason I went to school for it, like I went to Metalworks. I was working in a meat factory and decided to go to school because I hated working in a meat factory. And I was actually going to go into the trades too. My dad's wasn't an electrician. He's retired now. I was going to go into the trades because pretty sweet money in that. And then, but I was just like, yeah, like I love doing music, but I'm like tired, like, working all day, and I'm like tired when I come home, and like, and I like to be out late, like playing and stuff. And I'm like, oh, like working a day job sucks. It's really hard. Like maybe I can do this full time somehow. Like, well, what's something cool that I can do that'll make me money and excuse me, benefit me, maybe a skill. And I'm like, oh fuck, maybe I could learn how to record myself. Like, so like when I'm in a band, I don't have to pay somebody to record us. I can just do this myself. That's a really good idea. So I'm like, I'm gonna go to school for that. And like, it totally wasn't the intention to even record anybody else. And yeah, so obviously long and arduous road after that, like changing course, and it didn't turn out that way. It didn't, like, by the time I was done school, like my band wasn't really doing anything anymore, and started interning, and turned into running and assisting and getting gigs, and that whole thing, just climbing the ladder. But I've had Harry and Eric to thank for a lot of my progress.
So that's Harry Hess and Eric Ratz.
Yeah.
I know the history, just for anyone who's listening.
Well, I mean, Eric, he's done everything. Like, I mean,
a lot of records,
a lot of, like, Jesus, like I looked at his allmusic.com, like that, like, you see album credits for people. I'm like, holy crap. Like, I knew he had a lot of credits, but like I never seen them on and I'm sure that's not even everything, but significant Billy talent. Some of his early ones, 3 Days Grace, Cancer Bats, Big Wreck, Metric, like any rock music that you can think of, he's done. And I got basically like a assistant gig at Vespa, like soon after I got out of school. I was interning at Metalworks, and Eric was coming in there a lot to for gigs and stuff. He was doing a lot of those iTunes exclusive gigs.
Okay.
They'd do it live in the studio, and it'd be like released exclusively to iTunes. And he was working on like an Arkells one there at the time. And I had an he was like, we went to the studio manager, was like, yeah, like we're looking for a runner guy, like an assistant for Vespa for Harry's place. And they're like, yeah, well, we have 2 assistants here now, you can interview them. And yeah, like I did my resume all,
resume's like, weird. It's such a weird
I've never
thing.
gotten a gig from a resume. I was like all proud. I was all proud of my resume and had all my school stuff on it, that I knew all these programs. And he was like, I'm like, here you go. And he's like, great. Throws my resume. He's like, gate these toms. I'm like, all right. And so I just sat there and gated the toms, like really quietly or whatever. And he was just like, do you have a car? Yep. Do you live at home? Yep. Do you have a girlfriend? I'm like, oh yeah, but she knows what I do. She's not, it's not like I'm not married or anything. I'm not committed. I don't have kids or anything. So it's
responsibilities.
Like, yeah. Do you have any responsibilities? No. And he's like, perfect. Meet me up there. So yeah, like, and I literally just started. I went and met him up at Vespa, like maybe that week or whatever, and just went from there. And Harry's always been super cool, and Eric's been like, Eric brings a lot of his gigs up to Vespa. It's like his favorite room in the city. So I got to work on stuff with him like all the time, and back then Harry was still doing a lot, like a bit more production stuff. So some of my first gigs were with Pete, Les Bronce, and Creighton Doan, working on stuff with Harry, and then doing like my first album that I worked on with Rats was Cancer Bats, which was amazing because I was a huge fan of them when I was going to Metalworks. My buddy got me into them, and I was like, "Whoa, this band's fucking sick!" And I was on a gig at Metalworks. I was just like an intern, and I was interning on a session with Rats, and I was like, "Oh, that's the dude that did Cancer Bats, man. That's fucking wicked. Like, wouldn't that be a thing to work on one of those records?" So, anyways, like long and short of it, I ended up working on a Cancer Bats record, as an intern. But yeah, it was cool.
There's two things, even just from that. Well, just to go back to the idea of like not needing a resume, because it's funny when someone needs somebody in the music industry, especially, they're like, "Who do you know? Are they good?"
Oh yeah, man.
That's your resume, and then you have to prove yourself. You've got to prove yourself like right out of the gate. You got to be really quick about it. They know that you're cool and you can handle it, because like they don't have time to put a job listing up somewhere, and I'll just ask some friends and see who's available.
Yeah, and like your word, and like anytime like somebody's like, if somebody recommends you, like it's like somebody that you like, at least for me, and like I've found that like my word means a lot to me. So if somebody was like looking for an editor or looking for like an assistant, and I recommended somebody, and that person ended up being like irresponsible, or like ends up botching the thing, like I look like an asshole, because they'd be like, why did you give me this guy? Like, who is this? So my that means a lot to me, like who I recommend, or if I'm like, yeah, go talk to this guy, like he's always been really good to me, like you can trust me that I'm directing you to somebody that's a solid dude.
Yeah. No, I think that there's the flip side of it too. If someone recommends me or recommends you for something, you want to make sure that you do them proud as well.
Very much so, yeah.
Because they could have picked anybody. They picked you, and they chose you to put you on the gig or whatever it was. And like you don't want to let them down, because you know how important that is for their, as you're saying, you vouch for somebody.
Yeah.
Like it's important in this business. So
and I've gotten gigs like that. Like
absolutely.
Where actually I think Dennis Tukas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I
learned from Dennis too. Learned a lot from him.
Did you?
Yeah, him and Jeff Dalziel, like those were the two main guys that I learned.
Oh yeah, I did a session with Jeff like it was probably like half a year ago on some stuff. So he's fucking hilarious. I love that guy. But yeah, it was like I think Dennis was like working on something, and he messaged Harry and was like, guys that can edit like metal, and Harry was like, yeah, probably Chris. Like, and he's like, oh, okay, all right, like I'll message him, and I ended up talking to Jeff, and I think Dennis, and it was Dennis was looking on behalf of somebody else. So anyways, long story short, so I ended up editing a bunch of guitars on a Protest the Hero record.
Oh, wicked.
So I was like, all right, sure. Like it was pretty intense gig, but
and that's through word of mouth. That's not
purely
putting a listing up. So it's not to dig into this, but some people are looking for work in the business, but it's like your network is so important. And being top of mind is important too. Like there's still like being around, and it's not to go down this this basically rabbit hole right now, but the idea of just like we spend so much time in our workplaces, in our studios, so we don't get to see each other that often. And I think there is an upside to social media where we can still kind of pass each other's in the hallway there. And say hi, but it's like, when you're doing 12-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, it's tough to get out and meet people.
But you said like the being top of mind is super, super key, and just like being available. Like I think a lot of gigs that I got and continue to get are because like I'm not because I'm like the only choice, but because I'm available and I'm like,
Your first choice.
yeah,
Yeah. And
because you were like, yep, I'm there. Got it,
Yeah, and to actually go into this a little bit, like that was one of the things when I left school, like when I graduated, I made sure that I could spend the first year just being available. Just
Super
make sure.
important.
Yeah, because like if you can't say yes, if you say maybe, or like, can we do this tomorrow? That doesn't work with a lot of people's schedule.
No, and they'll find somebody else, and then
Yeah.
that'll be their guy.
Yeah, and then the downside of that too is I remember for like the first few years I was afraid of taking any time off because you don't want to lose your gig.
Guilty.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like when you're with certain people, like you can still give them the heads up at least, to do that stuff. But like that was my life in the beginning, and you're saying the same thing. It's like so many of us went down that path where like you just, you work like 60, 70 days straight, and then your day off is like, I need shoes. Like
yeah, I know, totally.
I need shoes or something.
I need to clean my place.
Yeah,
like, it's disgusting.
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky that way in the beginning, but yeah, as you're saying, like just being being accessible and being available, like in production, it fortunately is really important. But again, just building that network, and it's awesome to hear other real life stories of like build your network, because you will get calls, you will get emails, you will get texts or whatever. And that could lead into their gig. I wanted to ask, so you bringing up Cancer Bats, so just like the idea of them being a band that you're into, and then next thing you know that you're working on it. First question I'm curious about, was it a little bit surreal, like being in the room with the band and you're like,
totally.
I know the records.
Totally surreal, yeah.
The other part to that, and also kind of a quick answer on that one, but the other part to that too, what we learn in school, what we learn, say, on the internet, about how records get made, you being able to kind of see how a record of that size is getting made. Was there anything about it where you're like, oh, this is how you get drum sounds, this is how you get guitar tones, this is how songs actually get put together in the studio?
Like as that I learned on that?
Just production, yeah, like how it actually gets done.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if at that point that I really had any preconceived notion about like how it was done. Like I don't think, like I had never really been on a record before, so it was all pretty, like I was pretty green. So I definitely learned it. Like there was some tricks and stuff that I was really surprised to learn. But yeah, it was honestly all like pretty new to me. Like it was very very eye-opening, and like, oh, like you put two mics on the cab, like so stuff like that I was like kind of like school didn't teach me that stuff. Like it kind of did a little bit. Like there are points where where Eric would be like, what did they teach you there? It's like, did they teach you anything?
Well, because a lot of the time they need to teach you technical things that are safe.
Yeah.
And even on my end, there's like, don't EQ and compress to tape or what you're recording to.
Yeah,
and then you watch someone EQ the crap out of something and compress the snot out of it. And you're like, okay, well, that sounds good. That sounds kind of done. So I guess you can do that,
Yeah. And I think I'm still like guilty of that sometimes, where I'm, like I might be with Eric, and like, I try not to look over his shoulder too much, and like
be hard not to.
Yeah, very, very hard not to, but you also have to still be professional and not geek out too much and stay out of the way. And but there'd be times where I'd be like, so what are you doing over there? And be like, wow, like you're cranking all that top end. And he goes, yeah, does it sound right? I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. He's like, well, the stupid saying, use your ears. I'm like, yeah, ears. I know. He's like, mix with your ears, not with your eyes. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I gotta remember this. So he always like would keep me, kind of kick my ass to remind me of stuff like that. And those are some of the things that I realized that, don't look at what you're doing so much. Just get it to sound good.
That's one thing with so I teach intro to recording, and with the students, I'm like, don't worry about what your EQ curve looks like sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's really gross looking. It's not all like pretty and gentle and stuff. Sometimes it's really aggressive, and it's like whatever gets you across the finish line, whatever sounds good.
Totally.
Yeah. But no, I hear you with the whole use your ears thing, because it's such a cliche thing to say, but it really is a thing in the studio.
Oh no, yeah, and he totally caught me on it like a couple of times.
This looks good though.
Yeah, but that's like 10 dB, man. Like you adding 10 dB on that thing? Yeah, it needs it. Oh, all right. Yeah.
And if it's the other way, we take it down 10 dB. Don't worry about it. One of the things you mentioned, just like looking over someone's shoulder, because like being an assistant or being in the room in general, you can really, really encumber a session. Using some Skyrim words there, you can really slow down a session if you're asking questions constantly. But the ability to be able to just absorb the information and just see what's going on, and then pick your spot if you really need to ask a question.
Yeah.
Because one of the things too, just thinking about it, like being in those sessions, if you're a producer or lead engineer on that, and someone's constantly asking you questions and they're not paying the bill, it's one of those things where like you kind of don't really want them in the room after a while, because they're slowing you down so much if they're constantly asking you things.
Yeah, like I mean, it's bad enough with guys that are paying the bill, like the musicians asking too many questions. But like I've assisted a lot of sessions. Like I've spent a lot of time as an assistant, like fly on the wall, like that whole thing. I like to say that that's one thing that I've done well. And people might think like, oh, it's not that hard. Like, oh, you just gotta like get the cables and like, but yeah, it is hard, because like I've outlasted a lot of people on assisting gigs, and those assisting gigs got me editing gigs. And if you're trusted with editing, like
that's the thing,
and you can't sit there and like just ask stuff like shit. Like if I could have asked like stuff throughout all my gigs, like there's a surprising amount of stuff that I never asked, because you're not there to be asking questions. You're there to be an assistant. You'd be seen and not heard, and there, like when you're needed,
transparent.
And not there. Yeah, exactly. Like it's not. But as I progressed and like got older, and like like if me and Rats were just working on something, if he was doing a mix thing, that's where I would be able to get my questions in if he was mixing. But even then, like I'm really careful. Like he gets super into mixing, like it's like a full body experience when he's mixing, and like you just have to use common sense. Like if the guy's like in the room like with his like eyes closed and he's like totally, don't go in there and be like, hey man, like what are you doing? Like you just use your discretion. Like I don't want to pull the guy out of his moment.
Yeah, they're in the zone
listening to something. So sometimes you just like walk in. Like I'll literally walk in there and stand at the door until he notices me 10 minutes later, if I have to ask him about something important. So I pick my moments if I ask him stuff. But I've had some really good sit downs with him, like going through stuff, thankfully.
Yeah, it's picking your spots.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, and sometimes too, for anyone that's listening, it's like your question might be answered if you just wait a little bit longer.
And usually they are.
Yeah, and you'll figure out why something was happening. Well, just because the thought crossed my mind for anybody that is listening that maybe want to get into studios, how long does a bad assistant last?
Not very long. Usually no, like with like, I mean, you might know within like a week or couple weeks. Yeah,
the day perhaps. Sometimes someone's just not going to work.
I mean, if like the day is pretty short, like because usually like you'd interview them, right? Like
that's true. Yeah,
you talk to them, so you get a sense of like, okay, this person's not a complete doorknob, and then but it's talking to somebody one-on-one is a thing. Like, you can gather a lot from that. Like you just generally have to be like a good people person. Like that's a surprisingly huge part of being an assistant, is just being sociable and like not being awkward, and being like highly attentive to detail. And you can get a lot of that just from having a conversation with somebody. But all the little things start to come out over the course of
Right.
a few days to a week, where you're like, that guy, you heard him say he was thirsty and you didn't go grab him a water.
Sat there. Yeah.
Yeah, you sat there. Or, I needed you to plug this thing in and you were out front having a smoke. Like little things like that you start to see people not paying attention. It might seem stupid, but like it holds up a session if it's constantly little things, and sessions are constantly little things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And until you start running your own sessions, like I said earlier, when I'm running my own sessions, even after doing assisting for years and years and years, when I run my own sessions, I'm like, damn, like no wonder they keep hiring me to do this stuff for them, because it sucks. Because I have to be there an hour or two earlier to set everything up, line check it, create the session, create the tracks, create the templates, line check that, balance it, phase check, all that crap. And then they come in and start actually doing the engineering and the producing and all that crap and dealing with the band, while we're running around like ants, setting stuff and making sure it works. And then when the session ends, I got to stay for another 2 hours and tear that stuff down and put it back, and make sure it's not broken, make sure it goes back in its place. So yeah, like it is an incredibly valuable skill. So when you don't do it right, it totally screws everything up.
Yeah, I don't know the right word to use for it, but it's like assistance. It's like the oil or the grease for the whole machine that's working. And when it's running well, you don't notice it because it's just running super well. When it's not running well, you definitely notice it. You notice the little hiccups and issues.
And you know what? Like, I think, and after doing it for so many years, I really start to take issue with some of the mindset that like some schools and like maybe some studios, like I definitely know like some schools, not naming any, but would have this like, you'd be lucky to get this gig and there's 20 other people lined up behind you that would take that. So, like you're not getting paid, but be happy with that. You're getting paid in experience. And it's like, yeah, kind of, but at the same time, like assistants aren't disposable. Like finding a good one is really important.
Good ones, absolutely not.
And that you can trust. So this whole idea that like you should just be grateful to be there, like, yeah, like it's a good opportunity, but you know what? Like nothing's free. The price of everything keeps going up. I'm working for you if I'm doing a good job and I'm not an idiot and I'm helping the session flow. Like, yeah, there's 20 other people behind me that would love to be on this session, but are they as capable as me? So I hate that mentality that like, oh, you're lucky to be here. I really dislike that mentality.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because I know there's some people that like they start out in those situations, or people that do pull that kind of speech on them sort of thing. My thoughts: walk away, know your self-worth.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, if they're gonna abuse you, they're just gonna abuse somebody else. And you're, like, you are a living proof of it. The idea, just the value of that position on the team. And it's just like, it makes the session run that better. So if someone's, pulling the card, like you're lucky to be here. It's just like, am I really? Like, what?
Yeah. Like,
am I really lucky to be here? If you're saying I'm lucky to be here?
Yeah. And like, look, like I ate shit on a lot of sessions. Like, like they're kind of either crappy paying, really long hours. Like it never amounts to like an hourly rate, but like I got some like wicked experience and wicked credits out of it. But like I was always treated well, and like always, like the budgets weren't always amazing, and I was compensated pretty fairly in my opinion for it. And like I've been fortunate not to get too much of that, like you're lucky to be here kind of thing. Like I've surrounded myself.
People,
yeah, I've been very lucky with that, but I've heard and spoken to other people that have had that mentality that I'm like, you're nuts. You're nuts. You have no idea what you're talking about.
No, and the thing too, it's like you get what you pay for in a lot of cases, and the idea with some studios that seem to have a revolving door of interns and stuff, it's like, why is it really a internship, or are you just looking for labor that you can kind of bring in, squeeze as much out of them as you can, and then need someone that's fresh again to come in and take the long hours? Because like over 12 hours is not unheard of when you're talking about setup and tear down some of these sessions.
Oh no. Like when people are like, yeah, like, well, do a day. I'm like, yeah, you know, a day is like, to me, is like 10 to 12 hours at least.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I've rarely do a session that's less than 10 hours.
I used to do 10 hours for the band because I factored in some time for lunch and, breaks and stuff like that. But like that would easily be 12 or 13, 14-hour days for me. Like consistent. Yeah. When I moved to 8-hour days, which turned into a 10-hour day, it was amazing. It was like one of the best quality of life changes for running. Yeah, no, I hear you there. One of the things we talked about earlier, and it kind of ties into, again, the idea of you have these credits and like defining the credits, but just defining success as a musician. Because you mentioned before too, like there's some musicians, people get into music business, like they work at it for 3 or 4 years and they kind of pack it in because like, oh, it's not really working.
Yeah.
So how would you define success?
Well, you have to I think you have to define it for you. I watched this this video of John Mayer, whether you like him or not. I watched him. He was like speaking at Berkeley or something. Like he went to Berkeley and he dropped out, I believe, and he went back there and like did a talk, and he does this whole talk on defining your success, and that has forever stuck with me because he basically says like you need to define what being successful is to you. Otherwise, you're just going to be constantly chasing these like moving goalposts and not ever really be satisfied. So I think like, so some people might like their definition of success is just like say in the music business, I don't know, just having a cover band and playing every weekend, and like they have their day job and they're like, I'm happy. Like I'm happy, I'm stable, like that's success to me. Or like somebody else might be like, well, I want to win a Juno. Okay, like there's your your level of success. Or they just simply want to like earn a meager living and just be able to pay their bills and have a decent place to live in. So like I can't put a definition on success, like just maybe my own, which I think I'm still kind of trying to figure out. So but like we were kind of saying earlier, like I think that screws up a lot of bands because they go at it and at it and at it and at it, and they're like, oh, nothing's happened. Like, oh, I can't keep doing this. I'm dumping money into this thing. It's like, what did you expect?
Well, what did you want?
Yeah. And some of them have like, if you ask them like, well, I want to be famous. I want to label and I want to be rich. And it's like, okay, cool. And this is like kind of the other part that John Mayer was talking about. If that's what you want, like whatever you want, you have to figure out what avenues you need to take to get there. So like if you want to like write like, super ambient, like crazy weird music, but you want to be like a pop star millionaire, well, you might have to like cut a couple things and like maybe make it a little more digestible. You have to make sacrifices to get there and realize the steps that you have to take. Like too many people like have these really weird kind of what would you say, like paradoxal, like kind of things about like, well, I want to do this and therefore I'm going to be successful in this way. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, no, you have to compromise them. Like they don't work together. Unfortunately, that's just how things work.
I just thinking the idea of, say someone wants a Juno, which is the Canadian Grammy for our American friends, but the idea of like wanting a label or wanting a bus, and it's like when I hear that from bands or artists, I'm always thinking that's a really easy goal, because that'd be like me saying, well, I'd love to win a Stanley Cup. Or, it's like I'd love a gold medal Olympics. It's like, it's easy to say that, but you're like, there's so much other stuff that goes into it. And sometimes you can objectively look at your situation and go, I don't think this is going to work. I will not be a professional basketball player. No matter how hard I work at it, it's not going to happen, sort of thing. But it's like with some of the goals, it's like, be realistic about what you're working with and what you'd like to do. Your example of someone that has their 9 to 5, but also has their cover band and plays on the weekend.
Yeah.
They're probably super happy playing, opposed to someone who's trying to achieve a goal that realistically is probably, unfortunately, unachievable. They're going to be miserable, most likely.
Yeah.
Because every day they're trying to. One of the analogies that I like, or sayings I like, is like, you ask a fish to climb a tree and it's going to go through its whole life thinking it's stupid. And it's like, you need to be realistic with some of these goals that the bands are trying to set. And the amount of times that bands have been like, yeah, I want to bus and play festivals. I'm like, you got a ways to go.
It's like, and you're playing noise rock. Like, what?
Find
like
the noise rock festival and own it.
Like, you have to compromise a little bit, or like, like, oh, you want a tour bus, but you're all your songs are 7 minutes long. You want to be the next Nickelback or something,
and they'll argue that they're just doing something new and it's fresh, and you're just like, maybe make something, as you're saying, like more digestible and start there.
Yeah, or just realize that if you want to do something new and fresh, it's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard. If you want that stuff now, then yes, make your compromise, make it more digestible, follow the formulas. You can't hate on those bands. You can't hate on Nickelback, man. Those guys are probably like, I want to be rich as balls. What's a catchy riff? I like your pants around. Awesome. Is it going to make $1 million? Great. I don't care if everybody hates me. I have $1 million. I'm successful. Awesome. Good for Nickelback. Like,
go see them live. That's all I can say.
They're probably wicked.
It is. It's a rock show.
You can't hate on that, man. You cannot hate on that. They're successful. They're doing what they love.
Yeah.
And you're just salty about it.
Yeah. No, it's if I was them, I would have like a section that's just haters of my band or my music, so they can all sit together and just hate on it, but realize that it's really not that bad. Like Nickelback's live show it's super good. It's like, well, obviously it's gonna be but just like, it sounds ridiculously good. And this is coming from like studio ear listening, because like a lot of shows sometimes don't sound that great, but like they sound good. I'm not knocking front of house, but like some shows are, a little harsh sometimes, a little bit loud, but like their show was ridiculously good.
Yeah,
like I could take my earplugs out and go like, this sounds awesome. And just the percussive cannons and like just the lighting and so all that stuff. I remember, sorry, not to rant about this, but I remember years ago at Juno's, it was 2012. I think it was in Ottawa, and Nickelback was performing, and so many people were crapping on it. And I told my wife, I was like, just wait. As soon as they play, everyone will shut up. Yeah. Because they threw down, and they opened the show, and it was ridiculously awesome. I get goosebumps thinking about it, because you could feel the vibe in the room. Everyone's just like, oh, Nickelback, whatever. And everyone's like, oh my God, rock show. This is great. This is exactly what we want. This is the best. So it's,
that's amazing.
Do your own thing. Other thing I would say too, that show, Dallas Green played as well.
Oh yeah.
Well, Sydney Color played, but he played because Nickelback was like over the top, but he just had like a rug and his amp and a chair and his guitar and like some family photos on the. And goosebumps about this too. Family photos like around him on the video screens, and like that was the other one. Like he had everyone's attention. So like when you looked at creativity and musicianship and just like what they're looking to do, like he had it so scaled down, and they were like, him and Nickelback were opposite ends of the spectrum, but they both had the one thing: they had everyone's attention, and it was like top of their game performances. No, it was cool. It's awesome. Anyway,
I'd love to go to one of those Juno whole
I'll
thing.
say go to the dinner. The dinner is good because they don't televise that, so you get.
I don't even know how you go about that. Like, do you gotta buy tickets or something? Like, how do you...
just get a production credit on something.
Oh, okay.
We can talk about that
Working
after.
on it.
Talk about that after. There's a couple hacks to get it. To get in.
Yeah, I want those. Tell me.
All right, that's the post show. We won't televise that, just like the dinner. Just thinking what we were talking about before I went off on a rant about Nickelback. Where were we?
Assisting stuff, editing stuff.
No, it was before that.
Success.
Defining success. Yes. I agree 100%. More people need to as you're saying, like, define it for themselves. But one of the things too, it's like zoom out. Zoom out on what you actually want to do, because you're talking about the paradoxes of the two things that you want. Often we're at crossroads, like what would actually make you happy, sort of thing. And to get back to the like where I was going with this too, and getting back to the story with Sean Lefebvre earlier, like, because he had those bigger credits, like you got those bigger credits, and so when you were working in production and someone asks you, well, who have you worked with, you can whip out some pretty good acts that you've worked with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And then people like me, we've worked with a lot of local, a lot of regional stuff. It's like they haven't heard of a lot of it, even though it's been successful in their circles and it's done well. They haven't heard of it, sort of thing. So, any advice to someone in production that might be starting out and not feel like they've got those credits, or maybe in your position, as far as like what to say to people when they ask about who have you worked with?
Oh man.
Sorry, it's a huge question, probably.
Yeah, that is, because I kind of feel that a little bit, like, because like they're big credits, but like when I told you, you're like, well, what have you worked on? And I said all these, but I'm like, but I wasn't producing those. Some of them I was
pretty serious hand of cards on the table. So
yeah, like so like I'm not gonna deny my role in them either. Like, but oh yeah, like. Shit, like, yeah, how do you... I mean, I think that stuff's like almost just as valuable, because like you can spend years assisting and never touch a fader, but having observed how to do it all. And I've had people like, call me out on some of those and feel like, yeah, but what did you record? What stuff have you recorded? I'd be like, touche. And like I have a lot of my own stuff, but it's like indie bands and stuff, and I've done a lot of engineering on those albums. But I don't know, I think you just got to keep pumping at it, and like hopefully get with somebody that's like, people know. Like it helps when you're meeting clients, like, oh, who have you worked with? Oh, this person. Oh, I know them. Oh, I know that. Like kind of diverse, a little bit. So it just sounds like you've done a lot of stuff, and you know your way around, and they're respectable musicians. And not having the credits is not having the credits. Like it helps having the credits, but it's double-edged sword. Like the practical hands-on experience is so key, but people are so they love the names. They don't care what you did. They just love the names. If you can just get a couple of those under your hat, it helps. It certainly helps a lot.
It's not gonna hurt.
It'll never hurt. Like, even if it's like a few days or a week of your time, or doing a run, even any, like I've gotten credits on things for the most menial tasks. And but you can pump it, like you're not being dishonest. Like you can be like, I worked on that. Like I went and got the guy lunch, or I went and like I opened the session, I plugged the mic in or something. Like I got a credit with Jeff Delseal doing that, basically. Like he came and used Vespa, and they recorded a bunch of stuff, and I was there, and like make sure he's comfortable and all that shit. And I would have never given myself a credit on that, but I ended up getting a credit for like that like one of his Jeff's like singles that he released. And I was like, cool, like fuck, how thoughtful of the guy to like credit me too. That's wicked.
No,
pretty
it's
menial
always
task, but like I'll literally unlock the door and let the guy in, and
the thought is appreciated. You're still a
totally.
part of everything that happened to make it work. Yeah, sorry for throwing that question at you because it's one of those
No,
things.
it's a good one. Man.
So many
Like,
times people ask you, even if you're in a band too, like, "What's your band called?" You know, the somethings. Oh, I haven't heard of you. And meanwhile, the band's got like millions of plays on Spotify and like tours Europe and does super well. And they're like, "That's fine if no one's heard of us here. That's not a big deal."
it's hard, man. I still have to do that shit too, right? Like,
Yeah, because either there's where I was kind of getting at, it's like either there's like that top, it's that top crust that people are like, those are the names that they actually know, and that's what being successful in music actually is. And meanwhile, there's like everybody that's actually working as well. It's just like there's so much going on where it's not really a fair question when people are like, "Oh, what's your band called? Oh, I haven't heard of you." Well, of course not.
well,
I probably haven't heard of the things that you do for your job either.
And I'm not sustaining. Like I'm lucky that like Eric and Harry keep me like really busy on their gigs, but like that's not my entire living. Like my entire living isn't just working on albums that they're working on. Like I'm working with indie bands all the time, and little side projects or vanity projects of guys and stuff, and so that's like my bottom of the crust.
There's a hustle,
like the hustle part, where you're like, I was even doing like sound for little local festivals back when there was like live stuff happening.
Before times, yes.
Yeah, the before times. So yeah, man, it's a hustle. It's like not all Danko Jones gigs.
Oh, don't even. I want a Danko Jones credit. I love Danko.
That was
Jones.
awesome. That was really cool.
Well, I mean, so you got a chance for a warm introduction. I know he's got a podcast too, but
yeah.
A warm intro. Langford might want Danko Jones on here. What was I going to say? The idea, actually, you kind of, okay. Number one, I've had you for an hour. Do you have a bit more time?
Dude, I'm taking the whole month off, so we can talk as much as you want.
All right. I think they're going to cut us off in 4 hours, but you mentioned, or actually to continue, you talked about the hustle, the idea that you got the studio gig, you're there working, the idea of doing some live stuff, the idea of got your own independent projects that you're working on, the value of just having that drive and hustle to keep finding the gigs. Because some people think you just get a job in this line of work and then that's your job and you're good. But like, where do you find the time between the studio to put the independent project in?
I don't. And like kind of what we were talking about earlier about like being bad with social media and stuff. Like I don't back like years and years ago, I did like try, like hell, I even had stuff on like Kijiji, like, and I got a couple gigs off of them, but other than a couple gigs, like honestly, I've never gotten a gig with a resume, and all the gigs I've gotten were just networking and people I know, and it does make it difficult. As great as it is working for a studio and like working for somebody else, it makes it difficult once you do start going and trying to freelance, because you realize after all these years, all the work you were busy with was people that were not calling you. They were calling Eric or calling Harry or calling whoever, Vespa Studios or whoever that you're working for. So it's a bit of a reality check when you start going freelance and being like, okay, I got all these wicked credits, time to go get some gigs. And then you're like, fuck, I got no work. But I mean, it helps, but enough to sustain yourself. But yeah, I'm not great with social media. I don't think I get gigs from social media, but every gig I get like is usually through somebody I know, or like another gig I had done, or a recommendation or something. So and when I'm busy working, I don't go home and like start messaging. I used to do that. I used to message bands like, "Hey man, like I've worked on this and this and this, and
We all
you should call
did
me."
that.
I hate doing that. I absolutely hate it. I get messages like that from bands sometimes. You've probably seen my posts. I hate it. But I try to make mine personal at least. Like check out their music and like make it a personal message. But it never really worked with me. I think one band that I still know today, that I talked to, it worked on. But yeah, it's just never worked. Never worked for me.
Yeah, I've especially years ago messaged. I went through like a Reverb Nation, just looking for bands I thought sounded good, and just
Yeah.
giving them basically a compliment, and just trying to make some type of introduction. Not even looking for work, just a compliment.
Yeah.
And like, not to rant about this, but just the idea of some bands, like anytime when someone's a fan of your music and they reach out to you, respond to them, acknowledge it. Like just like that, you're building a potential connection there. But just like to get no response or just like a thanks.
Yeah.
Like, wow, like these are potential fans. And I've met some of these bands later on, and like they're nice. But it's one of those things I'm just like, you missed a little bit of this when it comes to how to interact. And nowadays too, it is how accessible bands are on socials, and you've got to respond to all of it. Just
I don't know. Maybe there's more gigs out there for me. Like if I start doing that stuff, I don't know. I just
for someone who sounds like they haven't had many days off in
like so
time.
I've been pretty okay.
Yeah.
But like I mean, like I haven't needed to, thankfully. And like I've had other people ask me that before, like, "Oh, where do you get your gigs?" I'm like, I don't know. And I can never. I have no idea. Like I have like a couple things planned. Like I know Eric's taking the rest of the summer off, and like I have like maybe a couple of like potential things happening, but that's how it always goes. Where I'll have a like couple weeks off, and I'll be like, I don't know what I'm doing next. I have no idea, and then all of a sudden it'll just be crazy, and so I don't know where it comes from. I'm so thankful for that, but it makes it really kind of stressful because you never know when it rains it pours. Like you don't really know when you're gonna be. It's like feast or famine. Like you just don't know if you're going to be out of work for a month. So here I am. I'm saying I'm taking a month off, but it might inadvertently be 2 months. Like we'll see.
You never know. No, and that's one of the things. Like for people that are starting out, it's like because, people starting out, it's like it can be incredibly inconsistent with how the workflow is, and like enjoy some of your quieter times. Because when it does get busy and you look at you look at your calendar and how many hours you got in a day, and you're like, I don't know how this is going to get done. Like it'll get done, but like this might suck. So
there was Mike Diesel had something over there in the, I don't know.
Oh, he's got a question here. You want to answer this? I said, do you guys ever go back and listen to old projects and think, damn, I think I was better before. How do you avoid being in a funk?
No, I don't listen. I don't think that. I think like, damn, that sounds terrible.
I feel like I always get better.
I hope so. Like I've listened to stuff where I was like, wow, like that. Yeah, like I don't know, I nailed that or something like that. But 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I could kill that now. Even stuff I did 2 months ago, I'm like, I think I could do that better. So I don't think I've been in a funk. I think I'm just trying to
I tell the students sometimes, like every 3 or 4 months, you should learn something, either by accident or like, with focused education. You learn something, it makes you feel like you suck. Where you're just like, oh, I wish I was doing this. You're talking about, I wish I was doing this like months before. Like, I wish I did this on that record. It probably would have sounded better. But that's just kind of how it is. But I would say like, because I don't really listen to stuff I've worked on, because like it gives me anxiety because I start hearing things, the way we listen. But also the other thing too, I usually listen to it and I just start reminiscing to like the good times on the project.
Yeah.
Or just like overall how the project was, because like you spend a lot of time with some of these bands.
I think I need a lot of space after I'm done working on something to go back and listen to it,
Because you're
and
invested.
then appreciate it and be like, that's not too bad. Like, I don't listen to it and go like, wow, that was terrible. But I'm like, yeah, like, cause yeah, you get so invested that I don't really fall into necessarily a funk. I usually just have a moment where, um, A-Bing stuff is really good, but then I'll A-B something and I'll be like thinking that everything's going really well, and then I'll A-B against something and be like, oh, like that sounds way better than what mine does. And I'll get in this thing and I'll just be like, oh, what am I doing? Like I can't get it to sound good, and I'll get super discouraged, and I'll hate the mix that I'm working on, and I'll revise it a bunch of times and listen to it way too much. And then I won't give up on it, but like eventually you just kind of got to settle. And then, like, I don't know, maybe a year later I'll listen to it and be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. But yeah, it's like self-loathing.
Well, we can just get too close to projects sometimes, and like you lose perspective on it. And yeah, you can go down a weird rabbit hole sometimes when you're just like, you need to step away from, just get fresh perspective on it.
You know, I've always been really bad with that, getting too close to things and like fussing over details that probably don't matter, and like while also being the guy to tell the guitar player like, look, yeah, you've done 20 takes, man, like I'll put something together, it's fine. But especially with like mixing and like listening and getting too close to it and like over critiquing it. But I will say, like, the past couple of months where I was like swamped with stuff was like one of those like learning moments for me, like where I was so busy and I just had to get stuff done that I didn't have time to get overly attached to stuff. And it really forced me to like let go and like basically mix something, make sure that I'm happy with it and that there's no glaring issues on my end. And I'm like, yeah, like this is cool. Like, don't you got to get it done, man. Like I'll put my whole heart into it. And then I'll send it to the band. And in the past I would send it to the band and then I would listen to it for a week and the band would be like, I love it. And I'd be like, yeah, but that snare though, like maybe it can have a little one. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, man, but just do whatever you do. And I would torture myself on it. But this past couple months, I would do stuff, send it to the band. They're like, we love it. Or I don't know, vocals up, this down a little bit. I'd be like, great, cool. I'm not listening to it anymore, because if I listen to it anymore, I'm going to obsess over it and I'm going to ruin it, or I'm just going to make my life difficult, and it just to make it that much better. And it's like kind of in the end, 12 months later, I'm not going to hear it because I've done that to myself a zillion fucking times.
Oh, absolutely. No, and that's really good advice too for people that are mixing. You know, like make sure the client is happy. You know.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, don't send this. One thing I learned from Jeff, he's like, don't send it unless you're happy with it. Because if you're not happy with it and they're not happy with it, it's just, that's not helping anybody. But if you feel good about it, send it out. There's always usually going to be, you know, you say vocal up, vocal down, like little tweaks in there, but just like remove your emotional self from that.
After the point, get
technical on it.
Exactly.
Send it out.
Yeah.
You'll save yourself some sleepless nights, to say the least.
Yeah.
Because we can always keep picking away at stuff.
Oh, dude, it's brutal.
Yeah, especially this day and age where like you're 2 clicks away from having that session open. You know, and just be able to pick away at it a little bit. But no, that's really good advice. Just like be able to, you know, distance yourself from it. I got one and a half more questions on here.
Sure.
Because you've been on so many sessions. Any favorites? This is probably one of those things we talked about earlier when you draw a blank on stuff. But favorite sessions you've been on, favorite bands you've worked with, favorite artists you've worked with. Like it was just good.
Yeah. No, you know what? The Skullfist stuff, the Skullfist session, and the Danko sessions. And the Cancer Bats was really cool. Like that was like years ago. I was like super green. Those guys were super nice. And it was just like one of those like really cool experiences. But yeah, Skullfist and Danko Jones, because they're absolutely hilarious. and like I've never laughed so hard on a session. And they're just like such humble, hilarious dudes that I just had an awesome time. And like when it was over, like I don't know if you ever you worked on those, like on an album with the band for like a month, or hell even a week, and you like get kind of close. It's like you
It's
spend
close
all
quarters.
this,
Yeah.
yeah, you spend all this intimate times, and then all of a sudden it's done, and you probably don't see that person for like again for like, I don't know, God knows, like maybe a year or two. And there's always a bit of like an empty feeling where you're just like,
Yeah. There's
oh
like a
man, like I
summer
miss
camp.
those guys.
Yeah, it's like summer camp vibe where you're like, okay, it's over. It's or that post tour. Like it's worse with tour because like there's post tour depression that sets in. But that idea of like your usual day was, and you're saying that, like those close quarters and like those relationships get built very quick.
Yeah.
And the idea, like people are very like the creative process is very emotional. And people are very open about stuff. And you talk about people that aren't awkward or easy to get along with and stuff. It's like having a good group and a good vibe. It's like everyone's riding high the whole time.
Yeah.
You know, and it feels good and work's getting done. And yeah, when it's over, you're like, all right, well.
Especially after like usually, and sometimes it's more apparent than others, like when you meet somebody for the first time and like they don't know you, or like they don't know me, like maybe they know Eric or something and they don't know me, and like they're a little kind of like kind of apprehensive or like a little quiet towards you because you know here you are, you're gonna come in and you're just gonna like, I don't know, I think like singing behind a mic is kind of like being naked in front of somebody.
Pretty
So
much.
like, and it's like you don't know me and here I am, like I'm standing there in the corner of the room, like it's kind of weird. And then over the course of time, like they start getting comfortable, and then you start like becoming kind of like friends on a certain level. And so yeah, but Skullfist and Danko Jones. So
Well, I'll start here. What is day one like when Danko Jones comes in?
Loading a lot of gear, like loading everything in, and everybody kind of just getting climatized to the studio. Like they've been to Vespa, like they've done a few records there, and like they've been there, so they're comfortable there. But usually people are kind of, you know, it's like they're coming into a new apartment, so they're kind of just like, all right, this is kind of where I'm gonna live for the next little bit. And it's usually pretty hectic because it's a lot of gear, a lot of, you know, it's usually a pre-pro day or a drum day, so it's a lot of setup. Like it's usually like a, you know, half to a full day setup. So pretty chaotic.
So but as far as building relationships, is saying hi to people you haven't met before, like is it kind of a meet and greet day a little bit as well?
No, it's just kind of like, hey,
They're just coming in.
I'm Chris, and bring your gear in. yeah. No, you usually I mean, if it's somebody new, like and say I'm yeah, like if they're totally new, then we've had a meeting. Like if it's one of my gigs or something, or if it's one of Eric's gigs, like he's already done that with the band, and they're kind of walking in, and I'm just there. And you just kind of got to establish like what your role is. Like I'm, you know, anything that you need, or
Right.
you know, any technical stuff you can ask me. Like so you can't just assume people know what you're doing there,
Because you're just there.
yeah. I've literally like there was points at the studio where I was like engineering, editing, and then also like kind of running the studio. So I'd be like doing dishes and like going and get groceries, and the band would be like, "What's that guy do?" like he's editing, but like he's also doing the dishes.
Doing
like,
dishes. So do you have the dishwasher editing, or is the editor washing the dishes?
Like, what's he doing? Like, that's why Rats was like, he was like, dude, you gotta get an assistant, man. Like, you can't, like, you know, I don't want the band comes in, they see you doing the dishes. I'm like, yeah, but it takes me 2 seconds. Like, I don't care, you know, like Vespa's not big, but yeah, I probably should have. Because it looks funny because I don't think about it, you know, like I don't think about.
Yeah, let's take a break, do some dishes, and
yeah,
I hear you. Day one with Skullfist. What's that like?
That was oh, those guys are I'd heard of them like a lot. And like heard stories about them, like just being these like crazy rocker, like just like party, like getting blasted drunk and stuff. So yeah, it was like a little like yeah, like like, oh, these are these guys. Like but yeah, like I don't know, they were super nice. It wasn't this was before the pandemic had really kicked off. So it wasn't, like it was still pretty relaxed atmosphere, and they're really easygoing guys. And like JJ rolling in with his kit and his like, five toms being like, what are we doing? This is ridiculous. But Danko was during the pandemic, so it was like a little more stressful. Because it was like one of the first ones back, so we were like, how do we deal with this? Like, what do we do? Like how do we run a session during a pandemic?
Yeah, what's protocol and what's
yeah, just being very careful. But yeah, no, Skullfist dudes, oh my god, those guys are so funny. I haven't laughed so hard. Oh god.
For anyone that is listening that's not familiar with Skullfist, that's SKULLFIST. Look them up. I remember their van outside the rehearsal factory.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that and just being
the yellow one.
Just like, is this real?
Yeah.
Is this a real thing? Because I always thought of it like marking your van or your trailer. I always felt like that wasn't a great idea.
Yeah.
Because like if you're on tour, you're easy pickings if you're somewhere. But when you're Skullfist and that's your van and your van looks like that, you get a pass. You get a pass in my books, because you want people to know what's going on, and I'm sure you can handle yourself if you're in a band like Skullfist. But I thought that was awesome. I saw that you had some shots from the studio with them, and
well, and then JJ has a side project, Thunderer, now.
Okay.
And they recorded that at their rehearsal space, their geary space there, and that was like one of the last things that I mixed there. Was the new Thunderer EP.
Now you brought like the rehearsal factory too for Toronto here, because I think they're all closed now.
Are they?
I think they sold all the buildings. Yeah.
Oh, they're sold. Why? Like Geary's still open right now.
Good.
Oh, I just dropped something off there the other day. And
okay.
I know people are still there.
Okay, they might be closing up soon then, because I heard all the buildings got sold, and I'm just thinking that is the end of an era for a lot. Because Lakeshore and what was it, Front Street or Sherbourne Front? Yeah, there's all three of them. I think in the city they sold all the buildings, but I hope I'm wrong, because like that was the hub for a lot of musicians.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, I saw something about that on Facebook about talks of selling them, but I don't really follow things very often. I'm not on the cusp.
Yeah, no. For anybody that's curious, I remember Front Street, Sherbourne Front Rehearsal Factory had Billy Talent and 3 Days Grace in it.
Right.
And that place was loud.
Yeah.
3 Days Grace was so loud. They were downstairs. They're super loud. And I just always curious about some of the favorite sessions that people have worked on. And, it's always memory lane when you hear some of those records and you start thinking about it. And then you said it best, just like you have never laughed so hard. It's like some of those sessions when people really get going and they really get comfortable, and not to say people go kind of nutty just with cabin fever when you're in, beside windowless rooms for hours on end, days on end. But like when it's good, it's so much fun.
Oh yeah.
It's so much fun. And people don't get to see that side of bands and musicians all the time.
Yeah. I've been really I've been really fortunate. I haven't been on a lot of bad sessions though. Like, you hear all these stories about bad sessions and all the music industry is all people are. I'm like, I haven't really been on a lot of bad sessions with like, bad people or things that went awry or anything like that. I've like pretty much like I'd say like over like almost 100% of the sessions I've been on were pretty good. It's stressful, but pretty good.
There's a line there between like, stressful and like not good, or like
not
getting off.
like not like abusive, there's always a little bit of stupidity here and there, but
yeah, we can leave it at that, because maybe when we're talking about the Juno hacks, we can talk about some of our sessions.
Yeah, I want to know how to get to the Juno party. I want to know how to get a Juno. That's my next goal.
All right, I think we can get to that. I think that's probably a good place to wrap things up here. Anything else you want to mention before we sign off?
No, I mean, there's what's dropping? Oh, the Danko album's dropping in it's like less than a week now.
It's got tour dates too.
Yeah, he just dropped some
December
tour dates today, and
might be going to Phoenix.
Yeah, that'd be cool. The Skullfest, I don't know when Skullfest is coming out. Yeah, I don't know, I got like stuff coming out, so some cool indie bands to check out as well that you'll hear about.
And to ask, where can everyone find you online?
I'm just on Facebook. The Crow's Nest Music on Facebook, but I don't think Facebook's super popular anymore. But Instagram,
it is.
just if you're gonna add me as a friend, just send me a message and tell me who you are, because that's my personal Facebook. But Instagram's like my jam, and that's the Crow's Nest Music on Instagram.
Well, it sounds good. If you're watching the replay on YouTube, I'll put the details below where to get in contact with Chris. Thanks again to everybody that took part in the chat. Any questions we did not get to, we will get to those later. Just want to thank, again, my guest today.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Yeah, really stoked that you asked me. It's really cool.
I'm glad you said yes, because again, like as you're saying, like we've seen each other in life very, very few times. We pass in the halls and social media and Facebook, where people still on Facebook. Passing there often, so I'm glad you could say yes to this, and I'm glad you got some time. I'm glad you have some downtime, because I know what it's like when the year just melts away.
Yeah.
And you're like, what did I do? And you look back on your credits and you worked on a whole bunch of stuff, but it's good to get some time to yourself. So that is good to hear.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. And again, thanks again to Chris Snow.
Thank you.
For watching this replay on YouTube. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. It does help a lot with the channel. That is our time today. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.